Hey everyone, get ready, because today we're diving deep into a revolutionary theory, one that's shaking up the world of mental health. You ready for this? It's the idea that what we call mental illnesses, it might actually be, well, metabolic disorders in the brain. Wild, right? To help us explore all this, we've got an incredible expert with us, someone who can untangle the science and help us connect the dots.
Yeah, this is a really exciting area. The theory basically revolves around how our brains use and make energy. And it suggests that when that process gets messed up, it could be a root cause for things like, depression, anxiety, all that.
And we're going to be using Brain Energy as our guide. That's a book by a Harvard psychiatrist and neuroscientist, Dr. Christopher M. Palmer. He makes a really compelling argument that mental disorders, they could actually be connected to physical health issues like obesity, even diabetes, Alzheimer's.
Yeah, what really got Dr. Palmer started on all this was that he noticed something. Rates of mental illness, they've been going way up, like in recent decades. And it's happening right alongside the rise of all these other metabolic disorders. So they're both going up together. And that really got him thinking that maybe, just maybe, there's some common threads here, some things that are contributing to both physical and mental health struggles.
So, we always hear about things like stress and diet and not getting enough exercise. But what else could be at play here? What else is going on?
Right.
What does Dr. Palmer say about all that?
Well, he starts off his book with some pretty striking statistics, just to give you an idea. Between 2008 and 2017, the number of young adults in the U.S. dealing with severe mental illnesses, it actually doubled. Doubled. Yeah, a massive jump.
That's huge. That's scary.
It is. It really is a worrying trend. And it forces us to ask, what is going on in our world, in our environment, that could be leading to such a dramatic increase?
Right.
And it's not just serious mental illnesses either. We're seeing a significant rise in autism diagnoses, too. In 2000, it was about 1 in 150 children. But by 2014, that number had jumped to 1 in 59.
Wow, that's a big jump in such a short period.
It is.
Okay, wonder if our genes could actually change that quickly to explain such a difference.
Right.
And then you've got bipolar disorder.
Right.
Which used to be pretty uncommon back in the mid-1970s. Now it's estimated to affect maybe 4 to 7% of people. It's hard to ignore those numbers.
Yeah, these numbers are really hard to dismiss. They challenge our traditional ideas about where these disorders come from, and they create an urgent need for an explanation, one that can account for this increase across so many different conditions.
So Dr. Palmer suggests that the explanations for this rise in mental disorders, they kind of fall into two main camps. One group thinks that maybe the statistics themselves aren't accurate. Like maybe we're just overdiagnosing. Maybe we're calling normal human experiences mental disorders.
Yeah, that overdiagnosis theory is a legitimate concern, especially when you consider the role of pharmaceutical companies and how they market their products. It's crucial to be critical of how diagnoses are made and who's profiting from them.
For sure. Then there's the other group, the one who's looking for a root cause that could explain this widespread increase across all sorts of different disorders. What are some of the big theories out there?
Well, there are a lot of theories trying to explain, the underlying causes of mental illness. But none of them fully capture how complex and interconnected these conditions actually are.
Right. To really illustrate this, how much we still don't understand, Dr. Palmer shares a story about one of his patients, a guy named John. John seemed to recover from depression, by going through those conventional therapies.
Yeah.
Like taking medication, doing psychotherapy. It looks like a success story.
But, John's case is hopeful. It's really important to remember that his experience, it isn't the norm. For most mental disorders, the treatments we have now, they don't really provide lasting relief.
Yeah, that's tough to hear. If these treatments are supposed to target the root causes, why are so many people still struggling? Why aren't they working for everyone?
That's the exact gap that the brain energy theory is trying to fill. It proposes a different way of thinking. Maybe we've been looking in the wrong place all along, focusing too much on psychological or social factors and neglecting something really fundamental, the way our brains produce and use energy.
So is he saying that mental illness at its core is more of a physical problem than a mental one?
The brain energy theory argues that mental disorders, they ultimately come from problems in the brain's metabolism, specifically in these tiny little organelles called mitochondria.
Ah, mitochondria. Now those are ringing a bell.
Yeah.
Vaguely. I think I learned about those in high school biology. They're like the powerhouses of the cells, right? But how do they relate to mental health?
Right, yeah. They're responsible for creating most of the energy that our cells need to function. And brain cells, well, they're real energy hogs. They need a lot of power.
Okay, so if the mitochondria aren't working right, brain cells can't do their job properly, But how does that turn into, like, depression or anxiety? What's the connection?
Well, when brain cells don't have enough energy, it messes up their communication networks, leads to imbalances in those neurotransmitters, and that's what ends up showing up as all sorts of mental and emotional symptoms.
So what you're saying is, the brain energy theory is saying that
Yeah.
mental illnesses are basically like energy crises in the brain.
That's a great way to put it. You know how a city kind of shuts down during a power outage? Well, when energy production is compromised in the brain, it can cause all sorts of disruptions.
That makes a lot of sense. And Dr. Palmer really stresses that this brain energy dysfunction, it's not just theoretical. There's actual physical evidence of changes in the brains of people with mental disorders. He talks about inflammation, for instance.
Yeah, inflammation, the body's response to like injury or stress, it's a really complex process. And chronic low-grade inflammation, it's increasingly being recognized as a key factor in a lot of chronic diseases, including mental disorders.
So is he suggesting that inflammation in the brain is the actual cause of mental illness?
It's not quite that straightforward. It's more like a two-way street. You know, inflammation can definitely mess with brain function and contribute to mental health problems. But mental distress itself, it can actually trigger inflammation throughout the body.
Oh, so they kind of feed each other.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. Inflammation and mental illness fueling each other.
Okay, but how does this all connect back to the mitochondria and energy production?
Well, remember, mitochondria are really sensitive to their environment, and inflammation can actually damage them, make them less efficient at producing energy.
So it's like inflammation is attacking the brain's power supply. This is getting intense. But how do we even know if these tiny mitochondria are malfunctioning in the first place? Can we actually see that happening?
It's tough to directly observe mitochondrial dysfunction in a living brain, but researchers have found some pretty convincing evidence using a bunch of different indirect methods.
Like what kinds of methods?
Well, one way is by measuring certain molecules in the blood, or cerebrospinal fluid, that can indicate mitochondrial stress or damage. Another way is to study the structure and function of mitochondria in cells taken from people with mental disorders.
So it's like a detective case
Exactly. Piecing together clues from different sources.
to see if mitochondria are involved in mental illness.
Exactly. And the more research that's done, the stronger the evidence for the brain energy theory becomes.
Okay, let's go back to that idea of mental illness as a syndrome. I remember Dr. Palmer explaining that a syndrome, it's basically a bunch of symptoms, but without a clear cause.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Psychiatric diagnoses, they rely on what we can observe, the symptoms, not on knowing the underlying cause, which makes it hard to develop treatments that actually address the root of the problem.
Right. And he uses this analogy, runny nose disorder and sore throat disorder, to illustrate how tricky syndromes can be. It's like we treat the symptoms separately. But what if they're both just signs of the same underlying issue, like a cold virus?
That's a fantastic analogy. It really highlights how important it is to look for common pathways or root causes instead of getting stuck in this siloed approach, where we treat each symptom in isolation.
Okay, so if we apply that to mental health, could it be that conditions like depression and anxiety aren't really separate disorders, but different expressions of the same underlying metabolic dysfunction?
That's the core idea behind the brain energy theory. It's just that. The huge variety of mental disorders we see, they might all stem from variations in how mitochondrial dysfunction shows up, influenced by things like genetics, environment, life experiences.
All right, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. But before we dive into what actually causes this mitochondrial dysfunction, can we talk more about what mitochondria do? We know they produce energy, but are there other things they're responsible for?
Oh, absolutely. Mitochondria are incredibly versatile. They do way more than just produce energy.
All right, let's hear it. I'm ready to be amazed.
Well, first of all, mitochondria are super involved in regulating gene expression, which means they control which genes are turned on or off inside a cell.
Wait, so these tiny powerhouses are basically controlling the blueprints of our cells.
Exactly. They have a big influence on how cells develop and function. And when their activity is disrupted, it can have ripple effects throughout the whole body.
That's incredible. They sound like little conductors, leading a whole orchestra of cellular processes. What else can these multi-talented mitochondria do?
They also play a crucial role in detoxification, helping to neutralize these harmful byproducts of metabolism called reactive oxygen species, or ROS.
ROS, those sound kind of scary.
Well, they can be. If they build up too much, think of them like cellular exhaust fumes. Mitochondria can handle a certain amount, But if they get overwhelmed, it can cause damage and inflammation.
So our mitochondria are always working in the background, keeping our cells clean and running smoothly.
Exactly. They're like the cleanup crew, tidying up messes, making sure everything stays in order.
This is fascinating. Are there any more surprises you can share about these amazing mitochondria?
One more cool thing is, they can shapeshift. Mitochondria can actually fuse together to form larger networks or divide into smaller units. And these changes in shape, they're closely tied to how well they function and their overall health.
It's like they're constantly adapting and reorganizing to meet the needs of the cell. They remind me of a busy city with all these different parts working together to keep everything running smoothly.
That's a great analogy. And just like a city can get messed up by traffic jams or construction, mitochondrial function can be affected by all sorts of things.
Okay, this is all incredibly interesting. But let's bring it back to mental health. How does the brain energy theory explain why someone might develop a specific condition, like depression or anxiety?
Well, remember, the brain energy theory says that all mental illnesses, they're fundamentally metabolic disorders of the brain. But how those metabolic problems actually show up as symptoms, that depends on a lot of different factors.
So there's no one-to-one relationship between a specific problem with the mitochondria and a specific mental disorder.
Exactly. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Imagine a city with different neighborhoods, each one specializing in different things. If the power goes out in the financial district, it'll have different consequences than a blackout in the entertainment district, right?
Right, that makes sense. So depending on which brain circuits are hit hardest by the energy shortage, different mental and emotional symptoms might emerge.
Exactly. And the severity of those symptoms, it would depend on how bad the energy disruption is and the individual's overall resilience and their ability to compensate.
Okay, so I'm starting to understand the concept. Dr. Palmer spends a lot of time in his book talking about the things that can contribute to this brain energy dysfunction. Can we dig into some of those now?
Sure. Absolutely. Let's start with genetics. They definitely play a role in making people more susceptible to mental disorders, but the brain energy theory suggests that genes don't directly cause mental illness. Instead, they influence how our mitochondria function and how well we can handle metabolic stress.
So some people might inherit genes that make their mitochondria more vulnerable to damage or less efficient at producing energy.
Exactly. And those genetic predispositions, they can interact with environmental factors to either increase or decrease the risk of developing a mental disorder.
So it's not a simple case of bad genes equal mental illness. It's more about this complex dance between our genes and our environment.
Exactly. That's a really important distinction. The brain energy theory shifts the focus away from genes as destiny and towards genes as a blueprint. That can be influenced by how we live our lives.
That's pretty empowering. It suggests that we have some control over our mental health. What about early childhood experiences? Dr. Palmer seems to put a lot of emphasis on those.
Yeah, early childhood is a critical time for brain development. And any negative experiences during those years can have long-lasting impacts on brain function, including the health of our mitochondria.
He brings up this concept called epigenetics, which sounds pretty complicated. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Epigenetics is basically changes in gene expression that happen without actually altering the DNA sequence itself.
Yeah.
Think of it like adding bookmarks or highlighting certain parts of a textbook. The content stays the same, but how you read and interpret it changes.
So our early life experiences can basically bookmark certain genes, making them more or less active, which can then affect how our mitochondria work.
That's a great way to visualize it. And these epigenetic changes, they can last throughout our lives, shaping our vulnerability to mental and physical health issues.
Wow, this is heavy stuff. It really emphasizes how big of an impact our early life experiences can have on our biology.
It definitely highlights the importance of creating nurturing and supportive environments for kids to help them develop healthy brains and resilience.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about hormones.
All right.
Dr. Palmer explores that too.
Right, hormones, those chemical messengers that regulate so many bodily functions, they play a big role in brain energy and metabolism too.
He uses estrogen as an example, how it fluctuates throughout a woman's cycle and then drops significantly during menopause.
Yeah, and those hormonal shifts, they can have a big impact on energy levels in the brain, and they likely contribute to why women experience depression and anxiety more often.
He also mentions testosterone, the main male sex hormone, and how it declines as men age, which can affect their energy and mood too.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to consider hormones when we're assessing and addressing mental health concerns.
Okay, hormones make sense. What about inflammation? We touched on that earlier.
Yeah.
But Dr. Palmer have a whole chapter dedicated to it.
Right. Well, like we said, inflammation is the body's natural way of responding to injury or stress. But this chronic low-grade inflammation, it's increasingly recognized as a major player in lots of chronic conditions, including mental disorders.
So it's not a simple case of inflammation directly causing mental illness, but more of this back and forth relationship where they both influence each other.
Exactly. It's this complex interplay. Inflammation can disrupt brain function and contribute to mental health issues, while mental distress itself can trigger inflammation throughout the body.
And we know that mitochondria are super sensitive to their environment, and that inflammation can actually damage them and mess up their energy production.
Exactly. Understanding this complex connection between inflammation, mitochondria, and brain energy, it's crucial for developing effective treatments that address the root of the problem.
All right, I'm really starting to see the big picture here. What about sleep? We all know we feel terrible when we don't get enough, but how does that tie into brain energy?
Sleep is absolutely essential for our bodies and brains to recharge and repair themselves. During sleep, our brains basically do a house cleaning, getting rid of metabolic waste products that build up throughout the day.
So when we don't get enough sleep, that waste builds up and messes with normal brain function and could contribute to mental health issues.
Precisely. Sleep deprivation also directly affects mitochondrial function, making them less effective at producing energy.
It's like we're running our brains on empty. When we don't sleep enough, no wonder we feel so groggy and irritable.
That's a great way to put it. Chronic sleep problems can have lasting effects on our mental and physical health, so making sleep a priority, it's super important for maintaining optimal brain energy.
Yeah, for sure. He also talks about light exposure being really important for regulating our sleep-wake cycles and overall brain function.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Light plays a huge role in setting our internal clocks, our circadian rhythms, which control a ton of physiological processes, like hormone production, metabolism, and sleep.
Right. He talks about how our modern lifestyles often disrupt our natural rhythms, leading to sleep problems and potentially contributing to mental health challenges.
Exactly. Exposure to artificial light at night, especially from screens, can suppress melatonin production, which makes it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep.
It's like we're tricking our brains into thinking it's still daytime, even when it's time to wind down and rest.
Exactly. And that disruption of our natural sleep-wake cycle, it can have all sorts of negative effects on our health and well-being.
I'm definitely going to be more mindful of my screen time before bed from now on.
Yeah.
What about diet? That's such a huge topic.
Right.
There's so much conflicting information out there.
Oh, I know, right? Diet plays a fundamental role in our overall health, and it directly impacts our mitochondrial function too. The brain energy theory really emphasizes eating nutrient-rich foods, foods that give our mitochondria the building blocks they need to produce energy efficiently.
So, we need to fuel our mitochondria with the right stuff to keep our brains working at their best.
Exactly. Just like a car can't run on an empty tank or on the wrong type of fuel. Our brains need a constant supply of the right nutrients to function properly.
Right. And Dr. Palmer points out that some things we eat can actually be harmful to mitochondria.
He specifically calls out processed foods, sugar, and trans fats as being particularly bad for mitochondrial health. These substances can directly damage mitochondria, leading to energy disruptions and inflammation.
So it's not just about what we eat, but also what we avoid.
Absolutely. Cutting back on processed foods and unhealthy fats, it's critical for protecting our mitochondria and supporting optimal brain energy.
Makes no sense. He also delves into fasting as a potential way to boost mitochondrial function.
Right. Fasting, when done safely and correctly, can trigger a process called autophagy, where cells basically do a deep clean, breaking down and recycling damaged parts, including dysfunctional mitochondria.
It's like giving our cells a chance to declutter.
Right.
And get rid of all the junk that's slowing them down.
That's a great analogy. And there's growing research suggesting that fasting, it might have therapeutic benefits for a range of conditions, including mental health disorders.
That's fascinating. What about exercise? We all know it's good for us, but how does it connect to the brain energy theory?
Exercise has a huge impact on our metabolism and mitochondrial function. It stimulates the growth of new mitochondria, makes them more efficient, and helps remove damaged ones.
So it's like a workout for our mitochondria, making them stronger and more resilient.
Exactly. And the benefits of exercise go beyond just physical health. Regular physical activity can improve mood, reduce stress, and boost cognitive function, all things that are linked to better brain energy.
This is starting to feel like a much more holistic approach to mental health, addressing not only the mind, but the body as well.
Exactly. The brain energy theory challenges that traditional separation of mental and physical health. It recognizes how deeply interconnected they are.
Dr. Palmer also talks about the gut microbiome, a topic that seems to be getting a lot of attention these days.
Yeah, the gut microbiome is all those trillions of bacteria living in our intestines, and new research is showing that. These microbes play a much bigger role in our overall health than we used to think, including our mental well-being.
How do gut bacteria influence our brains? Seems like a long way from our intestines to our minds.
Well, there's something called the gut-brain axis, this complex communication network that connects our digestive system to our central nervous system.
Okay, but what's the connection to brain energy?
Gut bacteria actually produce a bunch of different metabolites that can influence our metabolism, inflammation, even the production of neurotransmitters, all of which affect brain energy.
So if our gut microbiome is out of whack, it could contribute to problems with brain energy and potentially lead to mental health problems.
That's the theory that's emerging. And researchers are looking into how things like probiotics and changes in diet might be able to change the gut microbiome to support better brain function.
This is really connecting a lot of dots. It seems like everything from our genes to the bacteria in our gut can impact brain energy.
It really underscores how complex mental health is and how much we need personalized approaches that take into account each individual's unique metabolic profile and all of the contributing factors.
We've covered a lot of ground here. Are there any other things that contribute to this that we should be aware of?
Dr. Palmer also explores the role of medications, environmental toxins, even things like having a purpose in life, and social connections in affecting brain energy and mental health.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. Maybe we should take a break here. And then in our last segment, we can dive into those additional factors and talk about potential treatment options.
That sounds like a good plan. This deep dive into the brain energy theory, it's far from over. Stay tuned for the final part, where we'll explore how this groundbreaking theory might completely change how we approach mental health.
Yeah, definitely. Medications, toxins, purpose, connections. It's a lot to consider.
It is. Where should we start? Well, let's tackle medications first. I mean, they can be really helpful for managing symptoms, but we've got to acknowledge that some medications, they might actually be messing with mitochondrial function, making metabolic health worse.
Yeah, he talks about that. Things like some antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, even certain antidepressants. Having those kinds of unintended effects on brain energy makes you realize we need to be really careful, weighing the potential benefits against the risks of any medication, and maybe explore other treatment options whenever possible.
Absolutely. The brain energy theory really emphasizes that, finding personalized treatment plans, ones that take into account each individual's metabolic profile and any potential interactions with medications they're already taking.
So it's not about demonizing all medication.
No, not at all.
It's more about being informed.
Yeah.
And taking a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
When it comes to prescribing them.
Exactly. Medications. They're just one tool in the toolbox.
Right. Okay, let's move on to environmental toxins.
Yeah.
That sounds a little scary. What exactly are we talking about?
Well, think about it. We're surrounded by tons of chemicals in our environment. And some of them, they can actually damage mitochondria, disrupt brain energy, and contribute to mental health problems.
Like what kinds of things?
Oh, heavy metals, pesticides, even some food additives. They can all be culprits. The brain energy theory really stresses reducing our exposure to those things through lifestyle choices, like choosing organic foods, filtering our water, even being mindful of the products we use at home.
So it's about protecting our brains from those environmental threats, taking proactive steps.
Exactly. It's a crucial part of preventative mental health care.
Right. Well, this is definitely making me rethink my cleaning supplies. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Talk about purpose in life. How does that fit into this whole brain energy thing?
Having a sense of purpose and meaning in life, it's fundamental to our well-being, period. And research is starting to show that it can even influence our metabolic health, including how well our mitochondria function.
Wait, so feeling like our lives have meaning can actually be good for our brain energy. How does that work?
It's probably a combination of things. Reduced stress, increased motivation, that sense of belonging and connection, they all contribute to a healthier metabolic state.
So when we feel lost, or like our lives don't have purpose, it could actually be draining our brains.
Yeah.
From a metabolic perspective.
That's an interesting idea worth thinking about. The brain energy theory really highlights how important it is to nurture that sense of purpose, through activities that resonate with our values, things that bring us joy.
I love that. It's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about nourishing what makes us thrive.
Exactly. A holistic approach to well-being.
All right, last but not least, social connections. I mean, we all know relationships are important, but what's the connection to brain energy?
Well, social isolation and loneliness, they're huge risk factors for both mental and physical health problems. And they can directly affect our metabolism and mitochondrial function.
Yeah, he mentions that chronic loneliness. It actually triggers a similar stress response in the brain as physical threats, leading to all these hormonal and inflammatory changes that end up disrupting energy production.
Right. It's like our brains go into survival mode.
Wow.
But strong social connections, they act as a buffer against stress. And they help build resilience.
So taking care of our relationships, it's not just good for our hearts, it's good for our mitochondria too.
Exactly. We're social creatures. Our brains need connection to thrive.
This is amazing. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface here.
We have covered a lot.
But I'm already seeing how all these pieces fit together, how everything from our genes to what we eat to who we spend time with can impact brain energy.
It all connects.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We've talked about all these things that can influence brain energy, but what can people actually do to improve their mental well-being? What are the action steps?
That's the great thing about this theory. It gives us a roadmap for taking control of our metabolic health and optimizing how our brains function.
Right. He makes it clear that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Of course not. Everyone is different.
The best treatment plan is going to be different for each person, based on their unique needs and what's contributing to their challenges.
Absolutely. It's about tailoring the approach, figuring out what's specifically disrupting brain energy in each individual, and then implementing targeted interventions.
Okay, like what? Can you give us some examples of those interventions?
Sure. He talks about a whole range of strategies. Things like dietary changes, exercise, stress management techniques, optimizing sleep, even light therapy, and addressing gut health.
Right. He seems really excited about the ketogenic diet, the one that shifts the body's main fuel source from glucose to ketones.
Yeah, the ketogenic diet, it's shown some real promise in treating a variety of conditions, including epilepsy and some mental health disorders. It might be able to improve mitochondrial function, reduce inflammation, and that could lead to improvements in brain energy.
He also points to insulin resistance as a potential factor in mental illness and suggests that addressing it through lifestyle changes or medication could be really helpful.
Yeah, insulin resistance, it throws off glucose metabolism.
Yeah.
And that can deprive brain cells of the energy they need.
It's all super helpful. But it also sounds like a lot of work.
It's true. Making big lifestyle changes can be tough. But the potential benefits for both our mental and physical health, they're huge.
Yeah. And he stresses that it's a journey, not a quick fix. It's about making gradual, sustainable changes that support long-term metabolic health.
Exactly. He encourages people to work with healthcare professionals to come up with a personalized plan and address any underlying medical conditions they might have.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of mental health. Before we wrap up, can you give us a quick recap of the key takeaways from the brain energy theory?
Sure. Here are 10 key points to remember. Number 1, rates of mental illness are going up fast, and it's happening alongside the rise of metabolic disorders like obesity and diabetes. Number 2, the traditional explanations for mental illness, the ones that focus only on psychological or social factors. There might not be the whole story. Number 3, the brain energy theory says that all mental illnesses are actually metabolic disorders of the brain, caused by problems with mitochondria. Number 4, mitochondria are like the power plants of our cells. They're essential for energy production and all sorts of other vital functions. Number 5, a whole bunch of things can impact how well mitochondria work. Things like stress, inflammation, sleep, diet, medications, environmental toxins. Number 6, addressing those things, those contributing factors, can improve mitochondrial health and potentially relieve mental health symptoms. Number 7, the ketogenic diet, the one that switches the body's main fuel source from glucose to ketones. It's showing some real promise as a treatment for some mental disorders. Number 8, insulin resistance could be playing a role in mental illness, and addressing it through lifestyle changes or medication could be beneficial. Number 9, the gut microbiome. All those trillions of bacteria living in our gut, they can affect both mental and metabolic health. And number 10, personalized treatment plans, ones that take into account the individual's unique metabolic profile and contributing factors. They're essential for optimal mental well-being.
That's a great summary. I'm definitely going to go back and think about these points, see how they connect to my own life and the experiences of people I know.
I encourage you to. The brain energy theory has the potential to really change how we think about and deal with mental health.
This deep dive has sparked so many questions for me. It's given me a lot to think about. If mental illnesses really are metabolic disorders, what does that mean for how we see ourselves and how we see people who are struggling? What does it mean for the future of mental health care?
Those are really profound questions, and the answers will probably become clearer as more research is done and as the brain energy theory becomes more widely accepted.
It feels like we're on the verge of something big here, a new understanding of the human mind and its connection to the body.
I think so too. It's an exciting time to be exploring these frontiers of mental health.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of brain energy. We hope it sparked your curiosity, inspired you to learn more about this groundbreaking theory and its potential to transform how we approach mental health. Until next time, keep those mitochondria humming. Welcome back, everyone. We're in the final stretch of our exploration into the fascinating world of brain energy. Ready to jump back in? I think we left off talking about medications and environmental toxins.
Yeah, those are big ones. We were also going to touch on the role of purpose in life and those social connections.
Right. Okay, let's start with medications then. They can be really helpful for managing symptoms, obviously, but we have to be aware that some medications, they can actually interfere with how well our mitochondria work and potentially make metabolic health worse.
Exactly. It's a crucial consideration. Dr. Palmer talks about how certain medications, like some antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, and even some antidepressants, they can have those unintended consequences on brain energy.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we always need to carefully weigh the benefits and risks of any medication and explore those alternative treatment options whenever we can.
Absolutely. The brain energy theory really highlights the need for personalized treatment, plans that take into account the individual's metabolic profile and any potential interactions with other medications they might be taking. It's about finding what works best for each person.
So it's not about saying all medications are bad.
No, not at all.
It's more about being informed and having a more holistic view when it comes to prescribing them.
Right, exactly. Thinking of medications as just one tool among many.
Right. Okay, let's move on to environmental toxins. I have to admit, that one sounds a little scary. What are we talking about here?
Well, think about it. We come into contact with so many chemicals every day in our environment. And some of those chemicals, they can actually damage our mitochondria, disrupt that brain energy. And that can contribute to mental health challenges.
Like what kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, heavy metals are a big one. Pesticides, certain food additives, they've all been linked to these kinds of problems. Dr. Palmer emphasizes the importance of minimizing our exposure to these toxins, making different lifestyle choices. Things like opting for organic foods whenever possible, filtering our water, being mindful of the products we use in our homes, those kinds of things.
So it's about being proactive, taking steps to protect our brains.
Yeah, it's like preventative mental health care.
Okay, this is definitely making me rethink my cleaning products. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about purpose in life. How does that fit into all of this brain energy stuff?
Well, having a sense of purpose, feeling like your life has meaning, it's so fundamental to our well-being. And research is actually showing that it can influence our metabolic health, including how well our mitochondria function.
Wow, so feeling like our lives have meaning, it can actually improve our brain energy. How does that even work?
It's probably a whole bunch of factors working together. Things like reduced stress, that feeling of motivation, having a sense of belonging and connection, they all contribute to a healthier metabolic state.
So on the flip side, if we feel lost or like our lives don't have purpose, it could actually be draining us, metabolically speaking.
It's definitely something to consider. The brain energy theory really highlights the importance of finding that purpose, those things that align with our values that bring us joy, and then actually pursuing them.
I love that. It's not just about fixing what's wrong.
Right.
It's about nourishing the things that make us feel alive.
Exactly. That's the holistic approach.
Okay, last but not least, social connections. We know that relationships are important, but I'm curious, what's the link to brain energy?
Well, social isolation, Loneliness. They're major risk factors for both mental and physical health problems, and they can actually impact our metabolism and how well our mitochondria function.
He actually mentions that feeling chronically lonely, it triggers a similar stress response in the brain as actual physical threats.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it leads to all these hormonal and inflammatory changes that can mess with energy production.
So, like, our brains are in survival mode,
Yeah.
even though there's no real danger.
Exactly. But having those strong social connections, they can help us buffer against that stress and build resilience.
Right. Our connections help us thrive.
So nurturing our relationships, it's not just good for our hearts, it's good for our mitochondria too.
Exactly. We're wired for connection.
This is also fascinating. It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
So we have.
But I'm already seeing all these connections between our genes, what we eat, who we spend time with, and how they can all impact our brain energy.
It's all connected.
So where do we go from here? We talked about all these things that can impact brain energy. But what can people actually do? What are the steps they can take to improve their mental well-being? What are the action items?
That's the beauty of this theory. It doesn't just point out problems. It offers solutions. It gives us a roadmap for taking control of our metabolic health and optimizing how our brains function.
Right. And he's very clear that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Of course not.
The best plan for one person might not work for someone else.
Exactly.
It all depends on their individual needs and the factors contributing to their challenges.
It's about figuring out what's specifically going on for each person, what's disrupting their brain energy, and then targeting interventions to address those things.
Can you give us some examples of what those interventions might look like?
Sure. He talks about a whole range of strategies, things like making changes to our diet, getting regular exercise, finding ways to manage stress, prioritizing sleep. Even things like light therapy and addressing gut health can be helpful.
I remember he was particularly enthusiastic about the ketogenic diet, the one that shifts the body's main source of fuel from glucose to ketones.
Yeah, the ketogenic diet. It's shown promise in treating a variety of conditions, including epilepsy and some mental health disorders as well. It might be able to enhance mitochondrial function, reduce inflammation, and that could improve brain energy.
He also talks about insulin resistance as a potential factor in mental illness, and he suggests that addressing that through lifestyle changes or medication could be really helpful.
Yeah, insulin resistance can interfere with glucose metabolism, and that means brain cells might not be getting the energy they need.
This is all incredibly helpful, but it also sounds like a lot of work.
Well, it's true. Making those kinds of changes can be challenging, but the potential rewards are huge, both for our mental and physical health.
Absolutely. And he makes it clear that it's not a quick fix. It's a journey. It's about making gradual changes, ones that we can sustain over time to really support our metabolic health in the long run.
Exactly. And he really encourages people to reach out to healthcare professionals, work with them to create a plan that's personalized, and that addresses any underlying medical conditions they might have.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of mental health. It's so much more than we often think about. Before we wrap things up, can you give us a quick recap of the main takeaways from the brain energy theory? Just the key points.
Sure. Here are 10 things to remember. Number 1, rates of mental illness are increasing rapidly. It's happening alongside a rise in metabolic disorders like obesity and diabetes. Number 2, those conventional explanations for mental illness, the ones that focus only on psychological or social factors, they might not be telling the whole story. Number 3, the brain energy theory suggests that all mental illnesses are actually metabolic disorders of the brain, rooted in dysfunction in the mitochondria. Number 4, mitochondria are those tiny powerhouses in our cells, responsible for producing energy and all sorts of other crucial functions. Number 5, lots of things can impact how well our mitochondria function. Stress, inflammation, sleep, diet, medications, environmental toxins, all of those things play a role. Number 6, addressing those contributing factors can improve mitochondrial health and potentially alleviate those mental health symptoms. Number 7, the ketogenic diet, which switches the body's main fuel source from glucose to ketones. It shows promise as a potential treatment for some mental disorders. Number 8, insulin resistance could be a factor in mental illness. And addressing it through lifestyle changes or medication could be beneficial. Number 9, the gut microbiome. All those trillions of bacteria living in our gut, they can influence both mental and metabolic health. And number 10, personalized treatment plans, ones that consider each individual's unique metabolic profile and the things that are contributing to their challenges. Those are essential for optimal mental well-being.
That's a great summary. Thank you. I'm definitely going to spend some time reflecting on these points, see how they connect to my own life and to the people around me.
I encourage you to do that. This theory has the potential to really change how we view and approach mental health, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
It really does feel like we're on the cusp of something big here, a whole new understanding of the mind and its connection to the body. This deep dive has left me with so much to think about. If mental illnesses are truly rooted in metabolic dysfunction, what does that mean for how we understand ourselves and how we support those who are struggling? What does it mean for the future of mental health care? These are big questions.
They are, and the answers will likely emerge as more research is conducted. And as this brain energy theory gains wider acceptance, it's an exciting time to be exploring this.
It really is. Thank you all for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of brain energy. We hope it's ignited your curiosity and inspired you to learn more about this groundbreaking theory and how it might transform mental health as we know it. Until next time, keep those mitochondria humming.